Hello and welcome back to the channel. We are back in the airship, ready to talk some Exos Heroes. Exos Heroes is finally exciting again. We got a new character that we're going to be breaking down in this video in FC April. So let's look at her kit and determine if she is worth pulling for or if we should pass on this banner. Okay, so now we're back and let's actually look at the kit here and see how good it is. So the first thing is going to be April. She is a healer. She's a slow character, so we should definitely want to keep in mind her base stats before we get into the actual kit on how the turn order is going to play out. Start with the passive. You know, obviously it has first aid. Just every healer has first aid, so we'll skip that. The first part of her passive that's actually unique, Sound Fever. Mark increases the attack speed of all back row allies by 5 if any living or dead enemies are disheartened at the start of every turn. Resets upon moving to the next wave. Glad that they actually said that, even though they didn't say that in FC Scarlet, and that's how the new FC Scarlet works. Increase the attack speed of all back row allies by 5 if any living or dead enemies are disheartened. And I'm curious on if it's by 5 per enemy that is disheartened, or if it's just by 5 if you just happen to hit one with disheartened. And as you're going to see with the rest of her kit, having disheartened is only applied by Rachel, if you guys are not aware, and he needs to have the highest attack. He only affects disheartened to people that he has higher attack than. So that's going to be a very important part of April here on whether or not you should pull for her. Do you have Rachel? Do you have a built up Rachel where you could rely on the fact that he's going to have a ton of attack to be applying disheartened upon enemies? And just how impactful is that? Because in this game, 5 speed, if you're looking at characters that have similar speed, that 5 speed is going to actually mess with turn orders. I think we're going to have to really look into how matchups work and how your team's going to build on if this is actually going to make a difference. Do you actually, going faster is always better, but is it worth the slot on your team? Is it worth changing things around to just get this going on the team? Right now, the only character that really messes with turn order is FC Janai, a very good character. So it is a very strong passive. It's promising so far. Let's look at the rest of the kit though. Okay, next we have Encore Stage, heals 100% health to all allies upon dying. I guess it's kind of nice if the match is getting a little close. Then we got fan service overtime effect. Disheartened front row enemies receive 40% increased damage, and all damage against the targets are applied as piercing damage. That's going to be very impactful, especially if you're trying to break through these tanky, like this meta is getting slower and tankier, especially with FC Talia, FC Tantalo, and really it's very survivable. So being able to break through that front line is going to be pretty powerful in my opinion, and it's very reasonable to expect to be able to dishearten characters in the front row. That's like a guaranteed thing, because stuff like that, I only look at them theoretically from the perspective of everyone. If all things are being equal, or all gear is equal, you have the same amount of investment in those characters, is it still going to apply it? And a lot of times, in pretty much every single scenario, Rachel is going to have higher attack than front row enemies. So you could really rely on that as long as you put enough resources into Rachel to, because if you're getting massively outgeared if it's not applying to front row enemies. So that's what I like to look at. But as we'll see when we go into Rachel's kit, there's going to be a lot of characters that are in the meta that he will not be able to apply Dishearten to if all things are being equal. If you are applying Dishearten to them, that means you're well over gearing them, and you should. It's just not a good way to theory craft teams, is all I'm trying to say. So then lastly, we have the passive Little Star. Special at the beginning of a round, reduces received damage by 10% for each living ally except the caster, reduces up to 40%. This is the same passive in the previous character. It's kind of nice, because we really want all these effects to go off, but the last character in this faction, or Synergy 2, didn't really care too much, because there was nothing else in the kit. It was like a super garbage kit. But for this, I feel like this passive has very good synergy with a healer style character that's you're applying Dishearten and stuff like that. I really like having this Little Star passive in conjunction with what the character is, and that being a healer. A1 Music Wave deals 127% damage to all enemies. Status effect afflicts target with silence for 6 turns if the target is disheartened. So I believe silences everyone, because it's in Unleashed Potential when you max out a character that has bind, like Dorka or Rera. It says inflicts the target with bind. on AoE moves. In most games, when it says that you click on a target, it's going to apply the silence, or the silence in this case, or the bind in those cases, to the one you click on, and then everyone else does not get silenced or binded. But in this game, you do get bind, so if it has the same consistency and in the wording, then she's going to AoE silence people, which is crazy. 4-mana move here, and then so as long as the target's disheartened, and I think it's pretty reasonable to expect at least the front row enemies and maybe some backlines to be disheartened. So you're going to be silencing a lot of people. It's very, very good in my opinion. And then the last part of her kit, her A2, is Sage Star, heals all allies by 19% of own maximum health, cleanses all debuff and damage over time effects on all allies, and then heals additional 10% for each mana on the target. So for 1 mana, this is going to be one of the most impactful healing moves in the game. AoE, cleanses, does 19%, and then additional 10%. It's kind of interesting to me, because most healers, when it comes to their big heal move, they're burst healers, where as in doesn't matter how much mana they have, they are going to use all their mana, and then that heal is going to get bigger based on the heal or based on how much mana. Whereas with her, it's only a 1 mana move. She gains healing based on the mana of everyone else. I think that could actually be pretty good. I want to see it in action. If how the rotation goes, are we going to be healing after we burn all the mana? Are we going to be healing right before they burn all the mana? I think it's a really cool way to do healing. I think it's going to be pretty good. Not only that, you're getting the cleanse and debuffs and damage over time effects. I think that is a very good move on her A2. Lastly, because her kit is so tied to Rachel, let's go back to Rachel, and I kind of want to talk about a few things about Rachel. For the purposes of this point I'm trying to make when it comes to Rachel, I want to be in the book here. I want to show the base stats of all these characters so you can kind of get an idea what I'm talking about. Everything is based on Dishearten. First, let's read off Dishearten. Dishearten afflicts enemies with lower attack than self with the Dishearten mark, and decreases their dodge by 50 and their defense by 20%. I think that's amazing, especially, you know, decreasing the dodge and decreasing the defense. We're going to be guaranteeing a ton of damage here. And then his kit, very high single target damage. But the point I'm trying to make is his base stats and how should you realistically expect to be able to apply Disheartened on this character or not? He's kind of in the middle here when he's a counter terror. I really like counter characters, and all base stats are very similarly related to their passive. So he's a counter. So you want to look at other counter characters to kind of get an idea of what his stats are. So once you have an idea of what all the stats are, I recommend going through and like looking at all mana utilization characters and looking at all counter characters and command and protect and all that stuff, so you can kind of get an idea of what it's. I think it's a very important thing to do. It makes it to where at a glance I can look at Rachel and be like, oh, okay, I kind of have an idea of what he's going to bring to the table on his base stats, because I know what his passive is. Yes, he buffs Rachel by 100. So we got to take into account that he has an extra 16 speed and an extra 150 attack. And I think it's going to still come out to the same thing we're talking about. Okay, because he should have more defense than attack. I mean, if you look at most of these characters, see, this is what it normally is, but then you add 500 attack to that, or 500 defense to that, and then it does that to his defense. Okay, so his speed now 112. Subtract his speed by 16, like the benefits I'm getting from Signature Force, he's down to 96. So this is a good representation of the stats you're going to realistically expect to gain on counter characters. This is Schmid. He has, 1100 attack. He has, where's his defense? 964 defense, stuff like that. Like that's what you would expect with a counter attack character. If we look at someone like Jin, that's a character that's going to always on average have more attack, less defense, same amount of hit, and significantly more attack speed. These are the final hit characters. That's going to be the same sets you can expect there. And a couple other characters, one, for example, would be a mana utilization character. I'm not picking Baratheon because her stats are getting boosted due to Signature Force. Bernadette's another example. Madge is another example of these mana utilization characters before they get their stats boosted due to Signature Force. See how similar they are? 1296, 671 on defense, 90 hit, and 53 attack speed. You're starting to see patterns here. Point is, when it comes to this, there's a lot of meta characters that you can expect to have higher base attack than Rachel. With all things being equal, he's mainly going to be applying Dishearten to the front row characters. And what I think is really cool about this is that April's kit is really focusing on being able to nuke those frontline tanks. So be able to nuke healers in Talia, be able to nuke FC Tantalo. Potentially could be pretty cool. Also, the other big team is the Northbound Frosty team with Shufraken, Tantalo, Iris. So those are other characters that are very tanky that you're going to want to break through or be able to break through their backline and kill their FC Valentina. That's going to be something that's really important. So I really think that this potentially can put these characters back on the map a little bit due to FC April. The Disheartened faction, I think, needed some love. It's definitely a tier below some of the meta teams. I don't know if it's actually going to set them apart, though, to really compete with those top spots of Greenland and stuff like that, because you're kind of at the mercy of Greenland because Rara is always going first and she does so much damage on that A1. And so she could start the match off and just one-shot someone. Maybe not April because of her passive, like the new passive that she has on there where she's going to be reducing a lot of attack, but like maybe someone gets popped in the beginning. And I really don't like teams where you're always giving up that first turn to another team. So I think she's very good. I think she really boosts the Rachel faction of characters and makes them competitive. It'll be a lot of fun to try out what would be a good combo for this faction. And so I think she's definitely worth pulling for if these are the characters you invest in or these ones you pulled in. Like, let's say you build up some signature force just on Rachel's side, then I think April's gonna be very good for you. But if you're focusing on Greenland, you're focusing on Northbound Frosty, a lot of people focused on Janai's faction, then I would just hard pass and wait for something that really fits your roster more than this. And the direction the game's going, I think it's actually kind of interesting because people are going to really go hard in one direction. If they really focus on these nations, I think that's good for the game. So it's like, oh, okay, well, the meta is not really based around, like, there'll probably always be a better faction, like objectively the best faction or whatever. But if you're competitive with all your factions, but it's all about focusing on, like, really focusing your resources on a faction, I think that'd be a lot of fun. That's my opinion on FC April. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want more Exos Heroes content. Also, we have a Discord if you want to talk all things Exos Heroes. And with that, guys, I am out. Peace.